Hello there, and welcome to the Center for New American Security's annual public speaking competition, The Pitch. This is my favorite time of the year. This is such an exciting moment because this is where 4 of the up-and-coming next generation national security thinkers are going to pitch their ideas to a panel of expert judges, and the judges are going to vote, but also the audience is going to vote. And we will explain all of that. But before we do that, I want to first of all, and I'll remind you many times, this is an interactive event. We want to hear from the audience throughout. So please go to the little chat box right below your window on cnas.org/live or conference.cnas.org and enter the chat where you can cheer on the contestants, where you can ask questions, or you can also sound off on our polling questions. With that, I want to bring in one of the best colleagues I have here at CNAS. She herself started as a part of the next generation of CNAS many years ago. She is now the director of the Military Veterans and Society Program. Let's bring on Kate Kuzminski. Kate.
Hey, Shai. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, great to see you. How excited are you for this?
I'm super excited. We got a little preview this year of our pitches, so we know the talent that's about to enter the stage, and we're excited for the audience to see that as well.
Exactly. We've really been able to build the drama this year. This is something we always wanted to do. Exactly. And so now here on the grand stage, we are going to see 4 terrific pitches in their 2.0 iterations. Pretty excited.
That's right. Well, why don't I give us a little background on what today's event is. The Pitch is the Center's premier event to elevate emerging and diverse voices in national security. This year's The Pitch event is sponsored by the Common Mission Project, and we thank them for their support. We switched things up a little bit this year. The first round of the pitch was held back in May, and there were 4 finalists, and each of those finalists will be giving their pitches today. The 4 contestants are the winners of each heat and the People's Choice Award winner. Heat 1 is entitled Military Modernization. The pitch answers the question, what new ideas, strategies, or reforms could the U.S. Department of Defense implement across personnel, hardware, institutions, or processes to better meet the challenges of the future? Heat 2 is entitled Sharpening America's Innovation Toolkit. The pitch answers what new ideas in U.S. technology policy or economic statecraft can address growing national security challenges for the United States and strengthen the safety and prosperity of the American people. Heat 3 is entitled Safeguarding Against Threats to Democracy. The pitch answers the question, what new approaches could the United States take to protect the country from threats, including cyber, disinformation, and violent extremism, aiming to undermine and destabilize American democracy and threaten the homeland? And Heat 4 is entitled Reimagining Global Alliances. This pitch answers the question, what new approaches should the United States pursue with regional partners to address specific foreign policy and security challenges? Back to you, Shai.
All right. One really important thing we also want to mention is that, and I know Kate has this language down right, but we'll probably mention this again later, is that our speakers, they're coming with these innovative ideas, and these are of their own. They are not representative of their individual institutions where they may work in their day jobs. And so we want to make sure we have that disclaimer up front before we get started. And with that, I think, are we ready to bring actually, let's bring our winner from last year. Let's bring Bethan Saunders, who was our best in show last year. She was a judge in the first round. She's really had tremendous experience here as part of the pitch, now the growing pitch family. We're on our 3rd year. What advice, what words do you have for the finalists today?
Right. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to be here. I still can't believe it's been a year since I was pitching to our amazing judges. It's just such an honor to be here today and say congratulations and good luck. I think for me, reflecting on the last year, the pitch has opened so many doors and given me the confidence and encouragement to share my policy ideas with a broader audience. And CNAS has brought together such an inspiring community of emerging leaders in foreign policy and national security. So my advice to all the participants today is embrace it. This is an amazing opportunity to just share your innovative ideas with the world, thanks to CNAS. So just make the most of it, enjoy, take deep breaths, and have fun.
That's awesome. And I totally agree. We know there's a prize and there's all those things, but really this is such a great chance to get an idea out there and get it into the policy world. And I know you've done an amazing job with that. And we're so great to have you here again as part of the Extended Pitch family.
No, I'm so excited.
Now, coming up, we have folks who will be sitting in your most recent chair, which are the judges. Kate, you want to introduce our judges?
Yes, so I'll talk a little bit through the process. Each contestant is going to have 3 minutes to present their pitch to our panel of judges and to you in the audience. After each contestant has presented their pitch, our VIP judges will each ask one question about their pitch, and the contestant will have 1 minute to answer. At the end, the judges will rank the contestants. Contestants will be judged on 4 criteria: ingenuity and creativity of idea, practicality of the idea, academic rigor, and clarity, persuasiveness, and delivery. Rankings will not be announced until after all the pitches have been given. After the final pitch, our judges will submit their rankings, and while the judges are doing that, you in the audience will be asked to vote for your favorite in the People's Choice poll. The poll will open at approximately 3:55 p.m. In order to participate in the People's Choice poll and all others throughout the program, please go to either cnas.org/live or join the chat. You can also engage with us on Twitter using the hashtag CNAS2022. The contestant with the highest score will be the Best in Show winner, and the contestants with the most audience vote will be the People's Choice winner. All finalists today will be featured on the CNAS website, will contribute to a CNAS published commentary featuring their pitch, and they'll win a cash prize. The winner of the Best in Show will also be able to participate in the Sean Brimley Next Generation National Security Leaders Dinner event of their choice. So with that, let's welcome to the stage our VIP judges. First, we have our CNAS CEO, Richard Fontaine. So Richard, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I like to think of all of us as VIPs, but thank you very much.
That's right. So a question for you. You've worked on the Hill and at the State Department, and obviously you run a defense think tank now. As the consumer of these types of pitches, what do you find the most compelling or the best advice that you would have to someone briefing a senior leader?
Well, really, it's about the ideas, the new good ideas. There are plenty of new ideas out there that probably wouldn't work, and there are plenty of old ideas that do work. So if you can find or offer a new idea that can work and make things for the better, those are hard to find and very valuable when you do. So that's what I'm listening for, is new ideas that can actually be taken up and turned into reality.
That's great advice. Second, we're joined by Admiral Cecil Haney, who is the former U.S. Strategic Commander and CNAS Board of Advisors member. Admiral Haney, welcome, and we're so glad to have you here. So
great to be here.
I'll pose the same question to you that I posed to Richard. You were the consumer of pitches that came from your staff throughout your career. What's some advice that you would give to a up-and-coming individual about how best to get their point across?
Well, my advice to them would be, one, to be creative, and you really have to be able to get the attention of the policy wonks, particularly those that have grayer hair than I do, and as such, to not give up, to really be able to articulate themselves well, and be able to inspire others to want some of that.
Wonderful. We next have our CNAS Chief of Staff and the Director of the Sean Brimley Next Generation National Security Leaders Fellowship, Kate Kett. Kate, it's so good to have you on the screen.
Nice to be here, Kate. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So I'll pose a question to you. You've seen the pitch evolve over the last couple of years, and you really championed programs here at CNAS that put next generation national security thought leaders out there. What's your advice to the pitch competitors this year?
I think the best advice is that if you have a good idea, run with it. But know that this is always a safe space to fail, right? The only way that you'll know whether the idea is viable or not is if you put it out there in the world. So always worth the risk.
And then lastly, we have former State Department spokesperson and acting undersecretary, Heather Nauert. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, great to be with you all.
Hi, Heather, welcome. I insisted that I would get to ask your welcoming question as a former State Department Public Affairs staffer myself. You had to be part of one of the most amazing processes in government, which is the preparation for a daily press briefing. And if I could just lay out the scene a little bit for people. In that scene, you as the spokesperson are in an office, and one by one, tens, 20s, hundreds, I don't know, of officers and experts would come to brief you on whatever the issues of the day were from all around the world and prepare you for this big moment where you get in front of the press and answer questions. And I know there are these moments where a spokesperson has to ask somebody to take highly technical language and turn it into something that everybody in the country or everybody across the world can understand. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and how it might apply to our speakers today?
Yeah, sure. Great to be with you, Shai. And I should mention Shai was a close colleague of mine at the State Department and sat in many of those briefings with me. So you're absolutely right. Lots of people come in and they'll brief you on a specific region or a specific problem set that's making news on any given day. And so part of that process requires that individual not only being a deep expert in whatever it is they're discussing, but clear, concise, and able to anticipate questions. Now, Shai's absolutely right. Often we would say, now, what does that really mean? And how does that apply to us here at home? And what do people need to know about that? And so that clear, concise knowledge is important, but also being able to explain it simply, because part of our jobs as a spokesperson is not just to explain it to the world, but also the American public and why it is so relevant for them to care about.
This is great, and I can't wait for later when the judges are asking questions and you get to be in the question-asking position as opposed to being, in the hot seat on the podium. I think it'll be a lot of fun to see which questions you're going to bring out today. And it's so great to have you here and to be on stage with you. I admit I'm a little intimidated. Okay, Kate, what do we have up next?
All right. So
Kate Kuzminski. Sorry, we have many Kates.
Now we've heard from Bethan, who gave some great encouragement to our competitors for this year. We've seen our judges and gotten their advice, so I think, Shai, it's time to dive in. So our first contestant is Heather Price. She's the winner of the Military Modernization Heat, and her pitch is, are we losing in this era of great power competition? Shai will get a tech check for Heather, and we'll go from there.
All right, Heather, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, which means your pitch begins right now.
We are losing in this era of great power competition because we are not putting people first. The FY19 National Defense Authorization Act empowers Department of Defense to direct commission tech experts, bridging a critical skills gap in the armed forces. This has been celebrated as an achievement in military talent management, but after nearly 4 years, DoD has made minimal progress in this endeavor. Army G1 estimates that completed direct commissions total just a couple dozen across the entire Army. Applications of hundreds of selected officers have idled for years, with no resolution in sight. I am one of these Army officer candidates. I passed my board for captain in 2020, and I've still not sworn in. These kinds of delays actively discourage tech talent from military service at a time when it's needed most. Few would be inclined to put their professional and personal lives on hold for years, as I have done. DoD has congressional green light and a mechanism to attract this new talent. Failing to use it properly can only worsen our chances at overmatch against near-peer adversaries. This is not a resources problem. Army Talent Management Task Force receives $25 million and 88 personnel to execute this direct commission authority with comparable resources in other services. This is cultural, reflecting a long-standing tolerance for bureaucratic inefficiency. It's time for the White House to get involved. The White House should order a 90-day independent review audit of DoD's progress in executing Direct Commission authorities. The National Security Council staff will oversee appointment of experts from industry and academia to a review body. This review commission will re-examine how we can better utilize this congressional authorization to attract new talent and make recommendations to the Secretary of Defense. If this sounds familiar, it's because there is precedent for this. In 2021, an independent review commission sought to improve DoD's response to and prevention of sexual assault cases throughout the military. Now, this is not to equate subject matters or to minimize the egregious threat posed by sexual assault, but the successful adoption of that commission's recommendations by the Secretary of Defense with full support of the White House paves the way to address other overarching cultural challenges facing DoD, including its talent management problem. DoD cannot afford to alienate the tech talent needed in this time of great power competition. A White House-directed independent review audit must study these institutional failures and recommend meaningful change before this process becomes the same national security risk that DoD seeks to mitigate. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Heather. We'll pull up our judges now. All right, so reminder that each of our judges will ask Heather one question. So we will start with Richard.
Heather, thank you for that. And you didn't specify the existing problems that are preventing the direct commission of tech experts, but are they all bad reasons, or are there any legitimate obstacles to absorption of tech experts into the services that would have to be overcome in order to proceed with the course you're recommending?
Respectfully, I'm inclined to think that there are no legitimate reasons why it should take countless people years to join the military, especially at a time when it's needed most. And so, of course, you know, there's always going to be institutional delays and things of that nature. But no, I'm not inclined to think that any of them are truly insurmountable. But it's to the point where it can't be addressed internally anymore. We need to have some sort of independent audit to come in and review what exactly is the problem, rather than just leaving us to speculate for so many years, and make actionable recommendations so that we can improve upon it, both now and for future generations. You know, this has become a readiness issue, and it will continue to be one and continue to worsen until we get to the root of exactly what you're asking. What is it that's taking so long? What is it that's making it so difficult to process these hundreds of applications of people who want to join the military? It shouldn't be this difficult.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll move on to Admiral Haney. And I will note, I believe I referred to you as a member of our Board of Advisors earlier. You are, in fact, a member of our Board of Directors. So my apologies and my correction there. So Admiral Haney, your question.
Well, thank you. And Heather, thank you for such a succinct and concrete observation in terms of stagnation of ideas. I'm very interested in two things here. How big of a team do you perceive you need in order to have the right talent to do this audit? And then once the audit is complete, who do you see that would be in charge of carrying out whatever the actions are associated with the associated findings?
Sir, thank you for your question. And, you know, honestly, this is why it's you know, such a blessing in disguise that we do have a very concrete precedent for this. And again, as I said, you know, I'm not conflating subject matters with the Independent Review Commission on Sexual Assault in the Military, which convened last year and provided their recommendations following a 90-day period. But that model is exportable to a talent management framework. So in that commission, there were only 12 people. It was led by Lynn Rosenthal, who led 12 experts. And from there, they, you know, with the 90 days that they had, they interviewed, you know, roughly 600 people, but the core group was only 12 people. And so from there, they came up with their 82 recommendations. And so that's a lot of work for a, you know, very small, relatively group of people. I don't think that much more than that would be needed, but I would leave it to the discretion of the National Security Council staff to assemble a group of people that they deem necessary. But I would hope that they would follow in the footsteps of that independent review commission from last year and have a similar framework.
All right, next we'll move on to our Judge Kate Kett.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for your pitch today. I'm sorry that this is something that you are experiencing yourself, so we appreciate you sharing that with us. You've laid out sort of the cost of doing this and why it's so important, but talk with us a bit about the cost of not doing this.
Well, so, we talk quite a bit about, this era of great power competition and how, we need to maintain our overmatch against near-peer adversaries. And, it sounds like that deals primarily with technology, and in a lot of ways it does. But there's people behind that. There's got to be a focus on people, not just our systems. And I think that if we continue at the rate we are, we can't continue to ask ourselves, why do people not want to join the military? Why are we having trouble attracting and retaining digital talent without first recognizing, the gauntlet that we put them through when they do actually want to join? And so if we continue at the rate we're going, as I mentioned before, this is a readiness, and readiness issues will only worsen over time. And so I think that at this rate, we are at a very serious crossroads and in real danger of no longer being able to think that we have this overmatch that we have been searching for since the 2018 National Defense Strategy. So it's time that we address it.
All right, and your last question will come from Heather.
Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for this, and thank you for your service to our country. I would just like to know, what has the Department of Defense said publicly about the delay that you say is taking place right now?
Frankly, they haven't really said anything. In a lot of ways, it seems like it hasn't been very clear that it's been a problem. And so I recognize that I'm probably not the Army's favorite, selected officer right now, but I have, done my part to raise awareness to this issue, because honestly, internally, people don't even know it's a problem. And so that's why I'm inclined to think that it's no longer something that we can handle internally. Because if we can't get to the point where we recognize that it is a very serious problem and raise awareness to it and make a pledge to get it right, then I think that we are going to need that independent audit directed by the White House to try to help us with the problem. Not necessarily solve it for us, but make those recommendations to the Secretary of Defense that perhaps the Deputy Secretary could, take the lead on implementing, as with the Commission last year. I think that is becoming increasingly necessary. Thank you.
Am I allowed to ask a very brief follow-up? I'd just like to understand the scope of the problem that you're describing.
So I hit my 3-year anniversary of not being in the military earlier this year, and I'm one of just countless. I'm just the most vocal of that. And so I would say that in this day and age, when the military strings candidates along for that many years, it's becoming, like I said, it's becoming a readiness issue. And it's something that we absolutely have to address, and failure to do so is worsening our chances at dominance in a time when it's needed most.
Thank you, Heather.
All right, thank you, Heather, for your pitch, and judges for your questions. Let's see, Shai?
I'm here.
All right.
Well, that was great to watch from backstage. Thank you, judges. Things are already getting going. In a moment, actually, I know the judges will want to know who is in the audience, and we have a poll that we like to do at the beginning of the pitch in particular to get a sense of who's out there. Kate, do you want to introduce that poll quickly? Because I always like to know what our judges.
Yeah. So we're curious to see who's in the audience today. So feel free to answer the poll that you'll see up on the chat function. But we want to get a sense of who you are. So are you a student, grad student, or undergrad? Are you currently serving in government? Are you currently in the military? Or do we have folks who are in other categories out there?
And while we wait for the poll results, I wanted to bring in also a question from the audience. I feel like Admiral Haney, you might be well positioned to answer this, but Kate, I know you're an expert in military and the veterans. Kate Kuzminski, you may want to jump in, which is Matt asks, how does the DoD retirement plan impact retainment? And I guess recruitment as well. You are a retired admiral now, Admiral Haney. Do you have thoughts on how that impacts recruitment? Are folks thinking about that when they join up?
Well, I haven't seen a crisp survey result associated with how young folks look at retirement, but I will say that's probably smaller on their scale of what they look at going in terms of what opportunities do they have, what will they get to do, what's the promotion opportunities they have, what are the leadership opportunities, what are the opportunities to learn technical skills and those kind of things. I think that's what's first and foremost in their mind in terms of coming in right at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think part of what the question is getting at too is there's a change to the retirement system back in 2015 that went from a pension-like where you left after 20 years, you got a guaranteed retirement, to more of a 401k transportable benefit. And so the question is not necessarily how that affects recruitment, but how it affects retention. So if an individual is frustrated with their job and we're not managing their talent well, and they have the ability to leave with a little bit of retirement and go into the private sector or into government service, how does that affect that? We're still a little too close to see if it's changing how retention will happen, but in the next 5 years or so, I'm curious to see how that affects as well.
Very cool. All right, our poll results are in, and I love the results this time because I feel like people know the pitch is a great recruiting ground because 46% of our audience is either a federal employee or a contractor. So I feel like maybe there's even a few undersecretaries, deputy secretaries that are here trying to get their next best idea. Then 23% are undergraduate or graduate students. 30% are from the other category, and by all means, if you come from any of the other category. Now, we don't have members of our service community on right now, but I suspect we will before the day is up, and I know we have a lot of programming today. So with that, I think we're ready to put our judges. Thank you. We're gonna drop you backstage right now, and we're going to get our next contestant up following our next contestant, our next speaker. We are going to do the presentation of the Basivich Award, which is CNAS's highest honor for the next generation of staff here at CNAS. And Kate, you're a winner of that award, right? A little while ago. 7
years ago.
So looking forward to Richard presenting that after our next winner. But before we do that, we do our next winner, our next contestant. He won in the previous round. Would you like to? How about we bring him up and introduce him?
So Michael, great to have you back. Michael Ford is the winner of the Sharpening America's Innovation Toolkit Heat. Michael's pitch is the CRISP Initiative, a framework for improving the efficacy of U.S. sanctions policy. So let's give you a tech check.
All right, Michael, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
We can hear you great, which means your pitch begins now.
As Russia's invasion in Ukraine wages on, Ukrainians are dying. The country, the region, the world is weathering one of the most significant humanitarian crises of our time. Thankfully, the United States has not wavered in its commitment to Ukraine, having exploited one of its most and greatest foreign policy tools yet, economic sanctions. Consider that in the past few months alone, the Biden administration has sanctioned close to 1,000 targets globally. More broadly, the use of sanctions by the United States has increased 933% over the past 20 years. Without a doubt, economic sanctions are the preferred foreign policy tool of our time and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. Now, the problem is, despite the increased reliance on sanctions, there is no formal mechanism to measure the impact of sanctions. Sure, the US government conducts a periodic sanctions review, but that's done once every 4 years, and that's simply not enough, especially if we consider how targets continue to adapt to circumvent sanctions. That's why I propose the CRISP initiative, CRISP, which stands for the Committee for Reviewing the Impact of Sanctions Policy. Rather than hiring new employees, which can be long and arduous, CRISP could comprise detailees from various functions within Treasury. Each detail could last 2 years before cycling to another. CRISP could also be led by the Senior Advisor for Sanctions Modernization and Implementation. CRISP could specifically be nested under the Office of the Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence within Treasury. And this office is appropriate because it houses everything related to sanctions and provides visibility to the National Security Council. Now, you might be wondering, how do we implement CRISP? The purpose of economic sanctions is to achieve a set of policy preferences. Therefore, CRISP could take the latest U.S. national security strategy as a rubric to measure whether sanctions are accomplishing the strategic goals of the United States. For example, the U.S. Interim National Security Strategy defines China as a national security threat. Last year, the U.S. levied sanctions against Chinese military industrial complex. Using expertise from various departments, CRISP could analyze whether these Chinese companies are having their bottom line impacted. CRISP could also examine the volume of divestment by U.S. persons or assess the macroeconomic effects of sanctions on China's defense industrial base. It could examine contradictory FAQs or other general licenses. In doing so, CRISP could generate a score for the sanctions program to gauge the efficacy of blunting the threat posed by China. And depending on the score, sanctions could be recalibrated as necessary. The implications of CRISP are clear. It saves money. It improves the targeting strategy, and it reskills and upskills existing talent. CRISP makes sanctions crisper, in other words, by modernizing our sanctions strategy. Thank you.
All right, Michael, thank you so much for your pitch. We're going to move on now to our judges. So we're going to maintain the same order for everyone. So there's the same advantage to everyone. So Richard, over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. You've done the hardest part, which is come up with a catchy acronym for your proposal. The rest is really just more details. But I wanted to ask you about something that seems like it might be at least a slight disconnect between the stated objective of this and the methodology that you described. So I agree with you that sanctions are aimed to achieve a set of policy preferences, but in the methodology you described, the thing that would be measured is not the achievement of a policy preference, you know, China doesn't do this or does do this, Russia doesn't invade Ukraine or does do this. It's rather, what is the harm created by our economic measures on a firm or on the macro economy? So what is it exactly that this group would measure?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think this is the perk of having this new idea, right? It's super flexible. So it can in part focus on some of those actual tactical level questions related to the impact it's having on the targets themselves. In the example I laid out, it would be the Chinese companies that are being impacted by the sanctions. But you could also sort of extrapolate those findings into a much broader measure of success of, is it actually blunting the threat posed by China, which is something that is stated in the U.S. national security strategy. And so if, as I mentioned in my pitch, if we're able to generate a sort of efficacy score for each sanctions program based on whether or not it's hitting those sort of those tactical level sort of milestones, that sort of efficacy score could be used to inform that much broader analysis related to, are we actually blunting the threat posed by China, which is something that is a strategic goal that has been identified by the United States.
Thank you.
All right, Admiral Haney.
Michael, thank you so much for this work. You know, it's interesting as you have articulated and done the research and just how we have increased the using this tool, and you have given it obviously a low score in our ability to measure in a meaningful, timely manner in that regard. You mentioned a lot about the Treasury team, and I would really like to hear more of your thoughts about why or why not you would want this to have more of a cross-governmental approach to this versus totally involved in Treasury, particularly in this measuring of the effects that are seen, which seem to me cross multiple dimensions? And then also, do you see this approach being able to be used prior to initiating sanctions that could be used as a predictive kind of tool that could be used before even initiating sanctions in the first place?
Thank you so much for your question. I think it's an important one, largely because if I understand it correctly, what I'm really hearing is this is a question regarding scalability and to the extent, and to what extent we're actually pulling in additional partners, potentially other agencies, and then being able to sort of scale it to the point where when it's mature, we can make it use it as a predictive tool rather than just a reflexive one. So if this is sort of the question, I think yes, ideally, we'd be able to sort of build the CRISP initiative from within Treasury. And to be able to do that, we've got to start small with a team of, let's say, 11 to 15 that are within TFI, as I mentioned, being led by this one individual that has a clear and direct line to the National Security Council for those visibility purposes. And then if this model works, if we're able to generate efficacy scores for each sanctions program, then we can begin sort of building out, or excuse me, pulling in additional partners who are part of the sanctions process. Because for anyone that's aware of how sanctions are actually implemented, it's not just the Office of Global Targeting or the Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. We're pulling information from the intelligence community as well as from state, BIS, or the Bureau of Industry and Security at the Department of Commerce. And so ideally, it would be able to grow such a way that we could also pull a detailee, one or two, that make up that 11 to 15 amount, part of the CRISP initiative, from these different agencies that bring their different expertise and own policy processes in their own respective agencies to increase the effectiveness of sanctions. But then to your second question, which is, can we use this as a predictive tool? Well, let's assume that at a certain point in time, we get to a point where there are efficacy scores for every single sanctions program. We can then begin ratcheting up or sort of toning down the sanctions based on that score. And in doing so, we'd be able to predict, okay, this is how we can sort of ratchet up the tension in this particular region based on this sort of ongoing research that's part of the CRISP initiative.
Wonderful. Moving on to our Judge Kate Kitt.
Excellent. Michael, thank you so much for your pitch. It was great to hear how you expanded from the first round to today. A lot of really good new things that you've added, which is phenomenal. There's a lot of conversation around whether sanctions are effective in, who they're targeting, the entities that they're targeting, or whether they're hurting, the people of the country instead of those intended targets. Could you talk with us a little bit about what CRISP, what you foresee CRISP could do to sort of make sure that the sanctions are hitting where they are supposed to and sort of alleviating that humanitarian aspect?
Absolutely. And I think, again, another important question. As we know that in the latest Treasury 2021 Sanctions Review, a key component of that publication that was published last year was mitigating the harms that are done by sanctions and making them more exact and smarter in many ways and sharper. And I think that the CRISP initiative is well placed to sort of do that. As I mentioned in the pitch, one of the aspects that we can examine is, some of the frequently asked questions which Treasury publishes to help, industry or banks and other, the broader public to comply with U.S. sanctions. And so this can come in, particularly important when it comes to humanitarian aid. Who are you allowed to transact with? Who are you not allowed to transact with? What types of products are allowed to get to certain regions? These types of questions are also not only addressed in FAQs, but also in general licenses. Now, currently, after we issue a sanction or after we issue general licenses or after we issue FAQs, there's not a comprehensive review of how do these GLs or general licenses or FAQs and this action actually sort of come together to mitigate some of those harms being done. And so we find through the CRISP initiative, through a research or investigative process, that these GLs aren't actually mitigating the harms that they were intended to do, then that information could be fed to the National Security Council and other national security stakeholders who are part of this process, so that we could then tweak the efficacy, whether by issuing a new GL or by issuing new FAQ guidance. But currently, there's just not that operational level sort of mechanism to have that back and forth conversation that's required to improve the efficacy of sanctions.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And we'll move on to our last judge question from Heather.
Michael, thank you so much for describing a problem set that continues from administration to administration and certainly is not going to go away. Entities that are sanctioned are opaque by nature. They try to get away with doing things, and that's why the United States ends up sanctioning them. So how do you propose getting data on the efficacy of entities that are sanctioned themselves? How would you work with that? And then secondly, how would you propose bringing in Department of Commerce, State Department specifically, other than just through detailees, so everyone's sharing this kind of information?
That's an excellent question. So on the data piece, and then I'll sort of answer your second piece, which is how do we bring in disparate forms of expertise from these respective agencies? On data, I would actually push back on that question and say that the targets that are out there that are being sanctioned by Treasury aren't as opaque as we think they are. Sure, I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, identifying a certain individual that is engaged in terrorism or counterterrorism or terrorism financing, that was a lot harder to identify. But in an increasingly globalized world where data and publicly available data and information is widely available for the U.S. government, think tanks, individual researchers, one of the things that's shown is, in the case of North Korea, you can use public records to identify who are funding some of these networks in North Korea, who they're trading with, how China is propping up North Korea when it comes to sort of getting oil or getting access to energy and other luxury goods. I think in the case of the Chinese military-industrial complex, a lot of the companies that were targeted are publicly listed. In fact, this sanctions program in particular prohibits U.S. persons from trading in these publicly listed companies. And so with any publicly listed company, you just need to go to the Shanghai Stock Exchange, Shenzhen Stock Exchange to pull that data. And so to the extent that, we can exploit publicly available information where needed and where possible, that's going to speed up our ability to not only take action and sanction, but also share that with our necessary partners. Where those problem sets, are a little bit more sensitive, if you will, that's where I see data is most important in a classified environment. Now, to your second question regarding different forms of expertise and not just doing it through a detailee, I think that's absolutely, a key observation and something that, I'd like to sort of think more creatively about if we decide to move forward. But my short answer would be this. Beyond just doing a detailee, I think if they were able, the CRISP initiative was able to serve as a liaison between these different agencies, and sort of have monthly or quarterly calls with, the Economic Bureau in State Department or their counterparts in the Bureau of Industry and Commerce at the Bureau of Industry and Security at Commerce, and then also at the National Security Council. Having opportunities to brief these respective agencies that are sending these detailees could create additional buy-in and cohesion and ultimate support for the success of the CRISP initiative.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Michael. We've officially hit the halfway point. We've just heard from our first two contestants, and we're going to move and transition into our Basivich Award presentation. So I'm going to pull Richard up on the screen here to walk us through this next step.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Kate, and to everybody who's been participating in the pitch. Today, through the pitch and in other ways, we're highlighting the unique contributions that next generation voices make to the national security field. And of course, the day would not be complete without recognizing the Center for New American Security's First Lieutenant Andrew Bacevich Jr. Award. This is always a very special, very significant part of CNAS's annual curriculum. We presented this award every year, all the way back to the very founding of the organization 15 years ago. We established the award in honor of U.S. Army First Lieutenant Basivich, who was killed in action in Iraq in 2007. And through his life and through his service to country, his values represented the best of America. They exemplify the kind of courage and integrity and commitment to a better world to which we all aspire. And so each year we take a moment to honor the memory of Lieutenant Basivich and to recognize extraordinary members of the CNAS team for their leadership, their values, and their contributions to U.S. national security. I'd like once again to thank Dr. Andrew Basivich and his family for allowing CNAS to name this award after their son, so that year after year we're able to award this honor to extraordinary young individuals. This year, the recipient of the First Lieutenant Andrew Bacevich Jr. Award is Jason Bartlett. Jason exemplifies many of the qualities and values that have animated our awardees for well over a decade now. Jason's a research associate in the Center's Energy, Economics, and Security program, where he focuses on sanctions policy, proliferation finance, and cybercrime, with a focus on North Korea, Iran, and Venezuela. He also researches Korean issues, assisted by his fluency in the language, including the US-ROK alliance and North Korea. Before joining CNAS, Jason worked at various research organizations. He volunteered for several years at human rights-focused NGOs that were dedicated to resettling North Korean defectors. He was a Boren Fellow in South Korea, and he picked up advanced degrees from both Georgetown University School of Foreign Service and from Yonsei University in Seoul. But above all of the credentials I just listed and the various positions and qualifications he has, Jason combines a deep knowledge of and interest in foreign and economic policy matters with creativity, energy, and a dedication of public service. His publications are widely read, his research projects are exemplary, and his reflections on public policy are always fresh and intriguing. He's incredibly worthy of receiving the 2022 Basivich Award. Jason, congratulations. Well deserved. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
First, I'd like to thank you, Richard, the entire executive team at CNAS, and the family of Lieutenant Andrew Basivich for entrusting me with this great honor and award. I'd also like to thank my boss, Emily Kilcrease, as well as all my colleagues at CNAS for constantly encouraging me to challenge myself and for giving me the opportunity to grow enough at CNAS during these past 2 years to be considered worthy enough for this award. And also in particular, I'd like to thank Anna Saito Carson, Shai Corman, and Allison Francis, because you all have supported my personal and professional growth at CNAS since day one, both on the sidelines and on the limelight, and for that I am truly grateful to all of you. So I was born and raised in Long Island, New York, by a very hardworking single mother who instilled 3 core values in me since I was a child: integrity, compassion, and self-truth. First Lieutenant Andrew Basivich was a man who dedicated his entire life to serving his country, his family, and his community, a noble demonstration of the ultimate level of integrity, compassion, and self-truth, as he never shied away from his duty to protect. This concept of civil service and dedicating your life to a greater cause also permeates through the very fiber of CNAS. And since the beginning, CNAS has offered me the unique opportunity to work with the sharpest minds in the United States from both sides of the political spectrum to help craft bold and innovative policy ideas to help improve and protect our country and our allies at home and abroad. But honestly, getting to CNAS wasn't very easy. I returned from a few years abroad in South Korea to complete my master's at Georgetown when COVID-19 spread. And like many of my peers and colleagues, that ultimately removed all of my ultimate job prospects after graduating. I couldn't go back abroad to work because of COVID, and it was difficult to get a job here in DC because many places were hesitant to bring on new hires during the first stage of the pandemic. But I persevered and I kept on trying, and I finally landed this job at CNAS, which has afforded me opportunities far beyond my wildest imaginations or expectations. Despite my junior status, I've been able to brief the U.S. military, State Department, Treasury Department, Senate, and even members of the UN on my research and on several reports that I've written for CNAS. Also, I've been able to travel abroad to both the UK and South Korea to help present my research, all because of the support from my CNAS staff and team. Even just a few days ago, I was able to have dinner and meet the new South Korean Minister of Foreign Affairs and the South Korean ambassador to the US because my CEO, Richard Fontaine, offered me a seat at the table. And I was even asked to offer my own thoughts and opinions on issues related to the Korean Peninsula as a professional in the field, something that is not typical behavior for a think tank in Washington, D.C. But that's just it. CNAS is not a typical think tank in Washington, D.C., and that's what makes it so special, especially for the next generation of national security leaders, because it'll be us who will be sitting at the front of these discussion tables in the years to come, but our future success will only be as grand as the opportunities and space that current national security leaders allow us to occupy. And I think this is one of the most unique aspects of CNAS, is that they truly invest in the next generation and in our success. And being a part of this community that embraces and values the whole person and every aspect of your identity, that which you can see and which you cannot see, has been an enormous gift, honor, and privilege. And I'm truly humbled to be awarded this great honor to continue this legacy. And I hope to continue to make CNAS and all of my colleagues proud. And thank you again very much from the bottom of my heart.
All right. Thank you so much, Jason. Congratulations again. Well deserved. And it's great to see you as this year's Basivich awardee. And now, with that presentation, I have the privilege of turning it back over to our host and former Basivich awardee, Kate Kuzminski, and to Shai Corman, and they will introduce the Heat 3 winner. So back to you, Kate and Shai.
All right. Thanks so much, Richard. And I echo both Richard's congratulations, and also I echo Jason's sentiments about what a special place this is to be. So moving from that, we're going to move on to our Heat 3 pitch. This is William Coffin. William is the winner of the Safeguarding Against Threats to Democracy Heat. His pitch is Intelligence Opportunities in the Information Domain Against Disinformation. William, can you hear us? I'll do a check here.
I can. Can you hear me?
All right, you're good to go. And with that, we'll get you started now.
According to recent research, just under half of Americans often or sometimes get their news from social media, providing bad actors an incredible opportunity to use their disinformation against us. Our adversaries can lie to the American people and use our common everyday habits to do it. Bad actors have been able to affect elections, create an epidemic, and counter the good work being done by the United States around the world. And yet, in recent months, the crisis in Ukraine has shown how the intelligence community can play a crucial part in the fight against disinformation. And we have the tweets to prove it. For example, the British government's Twitter intel updates are presenting intel products adapted for the public that cut through Russia's lies and inform people as a crucial decision maker. And Russia is noticing as well, because they're having to change their tactics. It's much more difficult to fight against the truth than it is to take advantage of a void. What I'm proposing is that the United States should establish a whole of government body, the Interagency Information Board, or I2B, to standardize and codify this approach. The I2B would be led by the Office of Director of National Intelligence with IC decision makers from all intelligence agencies with the authority to declassify intelligence. It would also be made up of senior intelligence analysts and the public affairs professionals from the interagency. At the I2B, this group of experts would evaluate and declassify intel that has been provided by the IC based on public affairs requirements and using a criteria that weigh their requirement against risk and potential effectiveness. The practicing of declassifying intelligence is nothing new, but often is too slow. We need a process to respond swiftly to emerging and future threats. By establishing the I2B to meet on a regular basis, this could help the IC share and declassify critical intelligence more rapidly, not just during a crisis, but also in great power competition. The IC needs a culture shift to embrace that speed and accept a little risk. Because yes, there is risk here, as we are sharing our secrets. But rest assured, our intelligence professionals are trained in this kind of risk evaluation and management. What we need to remember is that the risk of inaction against disinformation is far greater than the risk of action. If we leave our adversaries and competitors space in the information domain, they will flood it with disinformation and their version of the truth. And the value in the I2B is the simplicity. It's just another meeting, free in costs and just requiring some change in policy. Establishing a board at this level, one with senior decision-maker buy-in, would inspire that much-needed culture shift, one that would then permeate through the rest of the intelligence enterprise. What's more is that this board would create a venue of collaboration between the intelligence community, which doesn't typically talk to the public, and those public affairs professionals whose very job it is to connect to the American people. Because once that intelligence is declassified, it would be in the hands of those public affairs professionals who could use it to highlight our adversaries' nefarious actions, all thanks to the credibility and hard work of the intelligence community. This board would allow the IC to speak to its most important customer, the American people. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, William. We're going to bring up our first judge here. So Richard, I'll have you return to the screen.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your pitch, your proposal. I was wondering if you could tell us how this differs from or is similar to the DHS Disinformation Governance Board, which of course was announced and then suspended in the face of some very fierce sort of political headwinds.
That's a great question, and one I thought heavily about when I was going through my pitch, because as I was building my pitch, that whole event was playing out. What I think where the I2B differs from that misinformation board is that the I2B is inside the Office of Director of National Intelligence. Intelligence agencies are typically looking at a threat. It's not trying to be a truth arbiter. It's trying to inform the public on threats. And also, I think that with the type of people that we can build this I2B with, we don't need to use political appointees. We can use those intelligence analysts that are experts in their field, and it doesn't have to be somebody who's appointed. It could be an SES that has been at DIA, CIA, or FBI for years, and a true expert in the regional, in the region or some kind of capability.
Great, thank you.
All right, Admiral Haney.
Wow, William, exciting subject. In terms of things and something needing a lot of brain power. I appreciate you and your team for bringing this forward. My question for you is broad in terms of threats to this type of approach with the ITB. My question really is, with such a construct, how do you avoid the U.S. being looked at in terms of picking and choosing which information to flow, particularly when you're not in a war involving combat and what have you? It's sort of a different scenario than day-to-day kind of things. And then how do you manage to keep the policymakers out of it? You sort of talked about the intel folks and you talked about the public affairs folks, but clearly usually there's a vetting that has to occur in a rapid fire kind of approach that involves policymakers. Over to you.
So in terms of how this could address threats and avoid the idea that it's cherry picking its information, I had the opportunity, thanks to this conference, to listen to Director Clapper yesterday, and he was a huge advocate for transparency in the IC. And I think the more that this board can be transparent and work with those public affairs officials in identifying what themes that we want to get after, that'll help us avoid looking like we're cherry picking any kind of information. And the more that the information is put out there and the faster it's put out there, I think it just will build that trust between this board, the IC, and the American people, closing that divide between us a little bit. And for the policymakers, I would say this construct should welcome them. And what's beautiful about a board or operational planning team, which I'm sure you're familiar with, sir, at a command, is that they're scalable. So if we are trying to tackle the big problems, the more people we can invite, the more representation we have, I think the better the product we can put out.
All right, on to our next judge, Kate.
Great. Thank you, William, so much for your pitch. I know that you mentioned the credibility and the hard work of the IC community, and I, for one, firmly believe that the IC community is credible and, full of great hard workers and civil servants. But at a time when it seems that many Americans are more skeptical of, their own government than ever, how would you propose that this sort of counters that narrative with the American public, when they're facing what could be considered by some dis or misinformation from their own government?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think where I really want to point out and highlight is what the Ministry of Defense at the UK is doing right now with their daily Twitter updates. They are using their credibility and trying to inform the people every day about the crisis in Ukraine. You go on that Twitter feed, and every day it's more information. And again, I go back to what Director Clapper said yesterday. the more information we're able to put out, the more we're able to show folks what the process is, the more transparency we can invite in our own agency by, sharing the information that we have. I think it'll start building that trust and start building on the credibility of, not only that we have that, or I have that working with them, but also, just the general American people, and especially establishing presences on Facebook and Twitter and social media and trying to push that information out that way. 32% of people get their news from Facebook. If the IC was able to establish a presence there and inform them on the things they care about, I think it would make them more identifiable and more credible.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll move on to Heather.
Sure. I'd like to ask a question from a different angle, and I agree that this is a tremendous problem. When I served as State Department spokesperson, a good number of times we would have Russian agents, I'll call them, from RT, state-sponsored networks, come into the State Department and pose questions to us that were absolutely inaccurate. They were lies and disinformation. So I see the problem that you have here. But my concern is, how do you ensure that this doesn't, one, become politicized? I trust the intelligence community, but nevertheless, there are lots of questions floating out there. And then the second part of the question is, the process of declassification already works. We've seen the Biden administration use this to pretty significant success as they've been calling out Russia in advance of some of its actions it's taken. So I'm not sure if there's anything that is actually broken in the system right now. Tell me where I'm wrong.
So as far as your point to politicization, I point to what Director Clapper said about transparency. The more we can be transparent about this process, the more information we can put out there, the more we can avoid the idea that we're trying to politicize information. We're just informing the public of the threats that are out there. To your second point about what it would fix, so I think, you look at a lot of the processes that we have across the DoD, and a lot of them are in that Cold War mentality, and we often get in our own way by establishing bureaucracies. So declassifying intelligence probably has a lot of bureaucracy there, right? And that is the manifestation of risk aversion. The way that this fixes it is by providing that senior leader emphasis and having someone at OD&I say, the risk is acceptable. We need to codify what we've done, and we need to start employing this as a regular basis tactic, not just for the crisis in Ukraine, which it's been very effective, but we need to codify it for all great power competition, highlighting, nefarious actions of our competitors out there in, Europe and Asia. And by having that OD&I person express how this risk is acceptable, it'll help those at the lower level, at the analyst level, know that, get comfortable with the idea that I can look to push this faster. I can push this up through this process to make sure it gets sunshine on it, that people know about this crucial piece of information.
Thank you.
All right, and I think Shai is rejoining us here. All right.
I'm back, and thank you to William and to our judges. Before we go to our next contestant, we are going to bring in another poll. We're going to ask the audience, but this one also we can direct at our judges. And so the question here is, looking forward, what do you think is most pressing to national security? And we are limited by the software, so we have 4 options here. Obviously, you can pick none of these, especially those in the chat. You can pick something separate, but we'll start with these 4. So one of them is technological innovation. Another one is human capital. Another one is great power competition. And the 4th one is climate change. And I think I'll start with Richard, because he looks excited to answer this question.
I do.
Which of these 4, or none of these 4, which I always appreciate a contrarian answer, do you think is the most pressing for national security?
Is this my excited face? I guess I would pick great power competition for the kind of Weasley reason that it also encompasses the other 3. So, U.S.-China competition includes climate change and technology and human capital, and to some degree so does U.S.-Russia competition. But I think we do have a major challenge on our hands. Never before has the United States faced 2 nuclear-armed great power competitors. Never before have we faced a great power competitor with the economic base that the People's Republic of China has. And so I think the United States has everything we need in terms of our resources and talents at home and our allies and partners abroad to be able to succeed in those competitions. But nothing about that is automatic. So that's what I would put first.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Heather, you've traveled the world with secretaries of state. You've seen these challenges up close and personal. Which of these four, or is there another one that you would pick?
Yeah, I would say the top one is great power competition. We have to be on guard. We have to keep our focus on some of the things that other countries, namely China and others, are trying to do. So I think that's the biggest thing right now.
Okay, we got two here from our judges. It'll be really interesting what our audience thinks. Admiral Haney, what do you think is the biggest challenge?
Well, I think I'm going to be congruent here with some words that's already spoken. I think it's great power competition because of the various levels of competition in so many different areas. Competition for talent, competition for technology, competition for everything across the dime, diplomacy, information, military, economic. They're all encompassed in that particular area. So I think that's what we have to continue to be focused on going forward.
Okay, thank you. All right, over to Kate, and then we will reveal the results.
Shai, you know that I am not well known as a contrarian, but in this case, I think I will be the contrarian. I think that the biggest challenge that the United States faces right now is education. We heard a little bit about it from William's pitch just now on mis and disinformation, but it's very clear that there's a very large disconnect with the American public on sort of the information that is available to them that may or may not be credible. And I think that it's really imperative now more than ever that, the generations that are coming up behind, and, we talk a lot at CNAS about futures, not formers, that they're very well educated and the things to look for and how to be better prepared so that we're thinking long-term and strategically to tackle things like great power competition, climate change, and everything else.
Thank you. And I think that also reflects the great work that you've been doing managing our next generation programs here at CNAS. Okay, we're going to get ready to bring in our fourth contestant. Now, this is for our audience at home. As soon as the question period for the fourth contestant is over, we will open up people's choice voting. So while the judges are tallying theirs in their private orb of the internet, that is the time where we'll open for a few minutes the People's Choice Awards. So get ready to vote for your favorite speaker. And I think with that, we're ready to say au revoir to our judges. We'll see you very soon, and bring up Jacqueline.
All right, so next we have joining us Jacqueline White-Menchaca. Jacqueline is the winner of the Reimagining Global Alliances Heat and the Round 1 People's Choice winner. Her pitch is institutionalizing climate diplomacy in our diplomatic corps. So I'll turn over to Shai to do your tech check.
All right, Jacqueline, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
And that's great. We can hear you, which means your pitch begins now.
Thank you. Today, I want to share with you how the U.S. can take an important step in addressing one of the most pressing issues facing the global community, climate change. What we don't often realize is that Foreign Service officers are on the front lines of the global fight against the climate crisis. Our diplomats work on everything from negotiating COP commitments to working to conserve 30% of the world's water and natural habitats. But here's the problem. They are doing this on an ad hoc basis and are learning how to tackle one of the most daunting and existential threats facing humankind on the job. Against a ticking clock of irreversible climate change, the U.S. can no longer afford to operate its climate agenda in this manner, and it's time to institutionalize U.S. climate diplomacy through the creation of a climate cone or specialized track in the Foreign Service. Why is this important, and why the State Department? Climate change will disrupt every aspect of the world as we know it, including issues that matter most to U.S. national security and greater global prosperity. As the sole representative of the U.S. government abroad, the State Department is uniquely positioned to tackle this disruption. For example, over 350 million people are facing acute food insecurity due to climate change-related effects such as desertification and drought. Russia's war on Ukraine has exacerbated this, and it's diplomats on the ground who identified Russian disinformation campaigns on how the West is to blame for global food shortages. While diplomats combat this narrative, they're also the ones brainstorming global food security plans to find alternatives to the wheat supply for Africans who rely on Russia and Ukraine for 40% of the wheat supply. Climate change is already transforming the geopolitical landscape. And the reality is that we need foreign affairs practitioners who can navigate climate diplomacy with an understanding of the science behind climate change and knowledge of foreign policy. How do we accomplish this? The good news is the Department of State previously had a cone that encompassed this work. The State Department can simply revive its energy, science, health, and technology cone to build off existing structures to place climate diplomats in key embassies. By dedicating in-country officers to climate diplomacy, the U.S. can work to specifically address climate as a security and economic challenge with host countries and offer technical expertise that supports our global alliances. Ultimately, we need diplomats who regularly meet with foreign ministers to be able to take climate concerns shared by host nations and transform them to programmatic deliverables rooted in science and the understanding of microeconomics. They need to be able to answer questions like, how will we feed the future? How will geopolitics adapt? How will we use data-driven solutions? And how can we do all this while supporting U.S. foreign policy objectives? As a future Foreign Service officer myself, I don't have the answers to these questions, but my colleagues and I will need to. This is hard work, but with the resources and training the climate clone will provide, I believe our diplomats and experts will find answers. With that, I thank you for listening to how the U.S. can restore climate leadership through a small-scale change with large-scale impact.
All right, Jacqueline, thank you so much. So we're going to bring up our last round with the judges. Richard, your question's up first.
Sure. Well, thank you. And it's really interesting to have someone thinking about the reworking the Foreign Service cones, because, of course, years ago there was the Energy, Science, and Technology and Health cone, which was eliminated and folded into the Econ cone. And so now you have the 5 existing cones. And I wonder if you could give us a sense of, let's say that a cone, the kinds of which you're proposing, is established, and now you have people in that cone that are filtered out into embassies abroad. What do they do? And is what they do more or less dependent on what the policy is in Washington, which would change or not change independent of the existence of this cone?
That's an excellent question. I think right now there are already Foreign Service officers working on the ESTH portfolio, and they're already doing the work of supporting local communities who are maybe subsistence farmers facing droughts, or they're already in certain communities combating misinformation narratives that the West is causing global food shortages. I think that what these specific ESTH coned officers will do is continue to do that work, but they're going to do it with the training and resources that don't necessarily exist right now. The ESTH portfolio is housed under OES at the Department of State right now, and I think that by expanding and creating the cone, we're institutionalizing climate diplomacy in a way that will ensure that our Foreign Service officers really have the technical expertise to be advising host countries on future solutions to climate issues they're facing.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Admiral Haney.
Jacqueline, what an important area for not just our nation, but for the world. And I thank you for looking at innovative approaches to this. I want to ask you if you can expand a little bit and give us some color, if you will, over this approach versus what has been going on for a while, perhaps has been listened to or not listened to, but there are many international forums, non-governmental organizations that have grouped together to really look and be a voice associated with climate change, trying to understand why putting it in a bureaucracy of something like the State Department will be able to move the meter faster in that regard, given the race here to do something better.
Thank you, Admiral, for your question. I think that, honestly, institutionalizing climate diplomacy will legitimize the climate crisis. I think you're correct in civil society organizations and international bodies are very much so focused on these issues, and it's diplomats at the table negotiating those commitments, whether it's at COP or the Paris Accords. And I think, unfortunately, there was a bit of a loss of U.S. leadership in this conversation under the previous presidential administration, and under this current administration, that leadership is being reestablished. But it's important that the U.S. signal to the world that we are committed to ensuring that we're focused on creating global action for the climate crisis. And I think by creating this cone, it's not only signaling to the world, but it's also ensuring that in future, perhaps in future changes of administration, we will still always have an area of focus within our diplomatic corps on the climate crisis, because we're no longer at a point where we can afford to not focus on this. Thank you.
All right, our next question comes from Kate.
Jacqueline, thank you so much for your pitch today. Great to hear other young people thinking about climate change and thinking about ways to sort of make the U.S. a leader in that area. When budgets are tighter than ever, and it's always a fight on Capitol Hill to get money, talk with us a little bit about where you see these resources coming from, and how you see sort of the ability to protect any budget that is given to, you know, the creation of this new cone, when the reason it went away before was budgetary.
Oh, sorry. That's an excellent question. I think, you know, just recently, Congress gave state and USAID over $105 million in funding for urgent food and humanitarian solutions, specifically in relation to the war in Ukraine. And a lot of this global food shortage is caused by the climate crisis itself. So the resources already exist. They're just kind of allocated in an ad hoc basis. And I think by creating this cone, institutionalizing it, and ensuring we're asking Congress for the funding it needs to function and create programmatic deliverables, we're going to circumvent the need to have to respond very last minute to a global food shortage. I think this is, you know, the money is there and it is allocated. I think we just need to create a comprehensive plan that ensures that we already have the money we need and it doesn't have to be in an emergency funding package. Thank you.
All right, and our last question from our judges for the day. Over to you, Heather. Oh, Heather, I think you might be on mute.
Someone there needs to unmute me.
No, you're good.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for your proposal. Really interesting and timely topic. There are already relevant cones at the State Department that address tremendously important issues, everything from counterterrorism to climate right now. I could see how the economic cone and also the political cones could handle this issue as it is. So what would you say to those who believe that this might dilute the strength and the importance of the existing cones that can already handle this?
I think it's not necessarily about diluting the strength of like the economic or political cones or cones that are already doing really phenomenal work on the ESTH portfolio. If anything, I think it's more so about providing Foreign Service officers with the training and the technical understanding needed to really do climate work on the ground. I think we're emerging to a place today where people are trying to figure out, like, in the embassy, what are the best plants that we should plant so we can ensure we're conserving water in Mauritania where they're facing extreme desertification? Or, you know, what crops should we be recommending to subsistence farmers in sub-Saharan Africa that they plant in the face of a drought? And I think it shouldn't really, I don't view it as taking away resources or the talent from a certain cone. And if anything, I think it's just bolstering the work that's already occurring and institutionalizing it in a way where more work can be done. Because, I mean, we also just saw a global pandemic, and the reality is with climate change, there's migration of animals. With the migration of animals, people are interacting with them, and animals are interacting with other animals they normally wouldn't, and this creates disease. Deforestation also creates this. So I think there are so many, it's such an intersectional issue that it should no longer fall under a cone that has to also focus on a separate portfolio. This isn't to say that, you know, climate change doesn't impact the economy. It absolutely does. But I think climate change is now at the root of this, and we need to think about how is climate change going to impact the economy? How is climate change going to impact great power competition, and instead of the reverse?
All right. Well, that concludes the pitches and our questions from the judges. Now we're going to turn it over to you as the audience to start your participation in voting for who will win our People's Choice Award. All right. So as Shai gets everyone set up here.
Okay, so we're gonna send our judges now into the, like I said, the secret orb of the internet where we hide them, and they are going to be doing mathematical equations, doing their voting, and while they do that, everyone should go to cnas.org/vote. If you go to cnas.org/vote, you will see a place where you can vote for the People's Choice Award, where you can vote for either Heather Price, Michael Ford, William Coffin, or Jacqueline White Menchaca. And we're going to keep that open for a few minutes while our judges are scoring. And so don't wait, jump in. But while we do that, I think we're also going to take this opportunity to tell you all what we have coming up. So next, all right, if you have been following the absolutely gripping, often terrifying events happening in Ukraine during Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You are probably, if you are following these issues, you've been tuning into Brussels Sprouts, CNAS's podcast that deals with transatlantic issues. And Jim Townsend and Andrea Kendall-Taylor, who's the director of our Transatlantic Security Program, have been doing a phenomenal job along with Carissa Nietzsche, bringing in tons of guests to provide analysis. Now, today's guest that we're going to have live coming up in 7 minutes, right after we announce our winners, it is actually, I believe, if I have my facts correct, the originator of Brussels sprouts. So this is like, I don't know, a Trevor Noah, Jon Stewart moment, or actually, I think it was Craig Kilborn that started the Daily Show, but anyways, but on top of that is really at the forefront of the diplomacy that is being done around this issue, and that is Ambassador Julianne Smith, also a CNAS alum, and so it's going to be an amazing program. We're going to go right into it after the pitch. This Brussels sprouts reunion, talking about really one of the most important things going on in the world right now, and when you look at the issues we've been talking about throughout this conference, I don't think we could get something more timely than that. So we have the, let's see, we have some questions about the voting. All right, so if you, oh, it's working. Okay, good. We have some from the audience. That's good. You can refresh the page if you had an issue at cnas.org/vote. Refresh the page, and you can vote. I'm going to go in and Rachel or Rochelle, if you are having an issue, I recommend refreshing your page and seeing if you can vote. And I do believe the voting is working now. We have confirmation the voting is working from our technical team. So refresh the browser. All right, Kate. While we wait for our judges to do their tally, question for you: what were some of the most exciting things you saw today in the trends? Because we know, as the host, we can't, mention our favorites, but what are some of the most exciting trends you saw among the speakers today?
I think from the delivery standpoint, the amount of energy that each of the contestants brought to the topics that they were talking about, and they all did an excellent job back in May, but you can really tell that they've been honing their skills as they have prepared for this final round and really taken that opportunity to heart. So it was really great to see kind of the evolution of their ideas and their delivery on those ideas. I think they're also really prepared for those questions. I
was so impressed with the confidence and the poise. As someone who, I am not great at prepared remarks, so for me, if I was in the pitch, I would definitely be waiting to hopefully come out swinging during the questions and have that, have that help refine and get a little deeper into my answer. I thought the question and answer was super exciting, and I'm not just sucking up to the judges. I thought our judges just brought it with very difficult, but really, really relevant and really, really helpful questions that I think if you're any one of those folks in government watching this event, as we know from the numbers, that you're gonna be looking at those to answer those questions when you take these pitch ideas on board.
That's right. That's right.
And as a reminder, folks, you can go to cnas.org/vote. It's coming across the ticker right now to vote for our People's Choice. Sorry, Kate, I cut you off doing my administrative work.
No,
go ahead.
I think that it just pointed to the fact that I think these contestants, if they did get those questions from someone in government, they'd be able to and equipped to handle those questions and answer them really well. So very impressive performance from everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so we're already probably planning the pitch for next year, Kate,
Right.
because this is now the third year. We can't believe it. I think back to all the folks that have been a part of making this possible. Lauren DeYoung-Schulman, who I supported as her co-host the first year, was one of the originators of the whole idea behind this. Jasmine Butler, who is a judge and a Basivich Award winner from the comms team with me. And then I also want to say some thank yous to Natalie Grogan, Emma Swislow, the rest of the comms team, including Anna Peterson and Jarrell Clay and Cam Edinburgh, John O'Malley, who's been jumping in to help us. I hope I haven't forgotten any of the folks that have worked so hard to make this particular event, which has so many moving pieces, a success. And hopefully our judges are voting, and we'll see a tally soon. Hopefully we'll see a tally soon. But in the meantime, okay, great. We have the tally is in. So I want to thank again everybody that's been working on the pitch. We are going to be bringing in our winners, not yet, and one of our judges, Heather Nauert. We're going to bring Heather up to announce the People's Choice. Are we ready for People's Choice? Just checking in with the technical team. If we are, bring Heather Nauert up to the stage. Oh, Heather. Okay, Heather, while we get our winner, we need you to unmute your mic on your side. Okay. It should be maybe at the bottom left of your screen. Bottom left of your screen. But there's a mute button. If we, okay. We're working on getting Heather unmuted. Heather, you might want to try refreshing your browser. That's usually what works. I do live tech support, Kate. I do it when you're doing a virtual conference, and anybody who has done one of these in the last 3 years knows there's always a moment where you're going to be doing some live tech support or a microphone, the internet works against you. So that's good. That just added to the suspense because we have, the People's Choice Award.
We can hear you.
Okay, Heather, we can hear you now.
That works refreshing the browser. I had not muted myself, but thank you so much for that tech tip.
It looks like it did.
Okay, so we do have a People's Choice winner, and I don't see where that is. Oh, here we go. Okay, People's Choice Award winner, congratulations. Everyone has done so much work and put so much into this. So congratulations, first off, to all of you. You did a terrific job at addressing some of our most crucial problems and crucial timely problems. But our People's Choice winner to announce is Jacqueline White Menchaca. Jacqueline, congratulations to you on the People's Choice Award winner.
Thank you so much, Heather, and to the rest of the panelists and judges. I'm just so honored to be able to participate with excellent competitors, and I was so impressed by everyone who spoke, and I really appreciate all your questions.
Great. Well, we are so happy for you and look forward to watching your career as it develops and see what happens with your idea.
Thank you.
That was such a great moment. Former State Department official presenting one of our people who spoke on our favorite institution, the People's Choice. And congratulations again to Jacqueline winning the People's Choice twice in a row in the first round and the second round. And thank you to Heather for being one of our judges and for presenting that award. Okay, the moment everyone's been waiting for. The Best in Show Award is going to be presented by Admiral Cecil Haney, member of the CNAS Board of Directors. Now is going to add Judge of the Pitch to his illustrious biography. And let's get you unmuted, sir, and let's announce the Best in Show. But if you have any opening preamble.
Yes, I do have a couple things I'd like to say up front. I just want to congratulate to all four groups that were presented here. Just extraordinary work, and they're all winners in that first round as well. And I want to give a drum roll to that and just thank them for their ideas and hard work and success going forward in their careers. Boy, Best in Show, hard work to pick from one of these. And I just want to congratulate Michael Ford. Congratulations.
So Michael is going to come up. He may have had to do the browser refresh as well. We had him, but he'll be back up in a second. He was there. Admiral, go ahead.
And I would like to say, his team made this sound easy, but he put some color on it to really express how hard crisp will be. And something that we see more and more going on there in terms of the tools we have in order to address issues. And I hope that this kind of thing can be adopted here rather quickly. And knowing that in any assessment, you have to start with something and then tweak it and get some bright people around it. And it's clear to me they've come up with a great model for us to follow.
As we wait for Michael, it's great to hear that he has such a great advocate in you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are just working out the technical moments, Admiral. We've got to just work out the tech here. And I just want to remind our viewers that coming up right after we present the Best in Show award to Michael and hear from him, we have waiting on deck Ambassador Julianne Smith, our ambassador to NATO, as well as former CNAS senior fellow and director, and we'll be going live with her. So hopefully we'll find Michael and be able to present him the award. If not, maybe we'll bring him back we've got Michael back. Thank goodness. All right, Michael, we've got you back. You're in program. Admiral, take it away.
Michael, congratulations. You're the Best in Show awardee. And there's the confetti. But, well done. What you had some stiff competition, I'll say, but boy, just a great idea, and I hope and pray that it goes forward here and can get some traction there in our policy world.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to win. Congratulations to all the other participants as well. This was really hard, really exciting, and really fun, and thank you so much.
Again, congratulations.
Congratulations, Michael. Thank you so much, Ambassador Haney, and to all of our judges, Richard Fontaine, Kay Kett, Heather Nauert, our participants. We're so thrilled. Remember, it's about these incredible ideas. All four of the featured winners are going to be featured in our publication. And then I think next, I'm going to pass it to Kate, who's going to, or maybe I won't pass it to Kate, to close us out and hand us right over. We're going to go directly into our live conversation with Ambassador Julie Smith. Congratulations to all the winners of the pitch. We can't wait to see you next year.